wasn't waiting for me to agree to that. He got into bed with me then. Like, this was one of those boundary violations that was so clear, but knowing she's there, it makes me confused. Well, if they're partners, why? That doesn't make sense.
Annie says that Epstein physically restrained her and started pressing up against her, and she says she was frozen in fear.
I do remember getting out of bed and getting into the bathroom and shutting the door. I didn't want to admit what was going on. My sister never shared with me anything about what had happened with Ghislaine and Jeffrey. I didn't understand until much later. They thought it was okay to touch a 16-year-old, the person that I loved more than anyone in the world, and there is nothing okay about that.
In 2019, Annie Farmer filed a lawsuit against Jeffrey Epstein's estate and Ghislaine Maxwell. She eventually accepted an offer from the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, which required her to drop the lawsuit.
Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers have said in court filings that Maxwell denies she was part of any of the activity that Annie Farmer says took place.
Looking back at the series of events now, it's just so clear how Maxwell was a really important part of the grooming process, and they worked together as a team, I think.
Annie Farmer is only one of a number of women who will make accusations about Ghislaine Maxwell, not all of them underage.
She told me to give Jeffrey what he wants, because Jeffrey always gets what he wants.
He was behind the curtain, but she was the puppeteer, orchestrating it all.
By the year 2000, Ghislaine Maxwell appears to have moved to a $5 million mansion on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, about 5 blocks south of Jeffrey Epstein's mansion.
He was in her life, for sure, but she was living in her place, and he was living in his place. So they were not a couple in that sense.
I do believe she fell in love with him, to the point where she wanted to marry him, and it was Epstein who did not want to marry.
At some point, their relationship became more of a business relationship, where she has admitted in depositions that she managed his far-flung properties.
I hired assistants, I hired architects, I hired decorators, I hired cooks, I hired cleaners, I hired gardeners. From time to time, I would visit professional spas. I would receive a massage, and if the massage was good, I would ask that man or woman if they did home visits.
We met at the Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills. This tall woman, polished, clean cut, just comes waltzing in, said, "Hi, my name is Ghislaine. Nice to meet you."
Shantae Davies was 21 years old, training to be a massage therapist. And she says that one day she's asked by her instructor to come join her for a massage appointment.
I mean, she was friendly and warm. She wanted to know where I was from, what my plans were for my life. So we finished our session, and then she offered to have me fly out for the weekend to work as her masseuse in Palm Beach. I was 22 years old, and it was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, traveling the world, being a personal private massage therapist.
Teresa Helm, who filed a lawsuit against Jeffrey Epstein's estate, says that she was also studying to be a masseuse in the early 2000s, and that she was approached with a job offer to work for a wealthy couple.
I was told Miss Maxwell was the one that would be who I'm hired for, and you will go meet her in New York City and interview with her. I walked to Miss Maxwell's townhouse. I was let in, and I was immediately directed to go up the stairs. She came out and she introduced herself to me, and, right away she was very polite, she was well-spoken, and then it was like, okay, let's do the massage now. There was a certain point where she fell asleep, so I'm thinking it's going really well. She then went on to tell me that there was a second part to that you're going to go meet my partner, Jeffrey. And that was the first time I had heard anything about meeting anyone else. She told me to give Jeffrey what he wants, because Jeffrey always gets what he wants.
After we landed in Palm Beach, I just remember Ghislaine and I driving in the Mercedes with the top down and having this talk on the way to the mansion. She was explaining that her partner was sort of the Ralph Lauren type, and did I like that type? Getting out of the car as we pulled into the garage, she turned to me and said, just do whatever he likes and you won't have a problem.
I walk up to this really elaborate door. It seemed very castle-like to me. So I was let in, and Jeffrey said, come on with me to my office. And we walk into that office room, and then he asked me for a foot massage. I start giving him a foot massage.
I got the massage table out and got it all set up. Jeffrey came in, gave me a little once-over. I started the massage, and he was asking me questions, how I liked massage school. He flipped over, and he asked if I minded if he touched himself. And I freeze. I remember being so confused. I remember not knowing whether or not Ghislaine knew. I didn't know what to say. I said, sure.
He starts pushing his foot closer and closer to me, and to the point where his foot is literally pressing up against my body. And he grabbed my chin in his hand, and he said to me, I know I can always trust a woman who shows her gums when she smiles. I was very scared. And so I get up from the couch and I start, walking towards the door, and he grabbed me from behind, and I just completely froze, and he assaulted me in the hallway. When I made it to the door, he said to me, don't do anything that I wouldn't do. I took that as a direct threat,
Teresa and Shantae's stories end very differently. Teresa says that she never spoke to them again. Shantae says that she continued to occasionally work for and travel with Epstein and Maxwell, and she says that Epstein sexually assaulted her on multiple occasions.
I had already come from a background in which I had been taught to accept abuse. It just became a situation where I just got deeper and deeper into it, and I didn't know how to pull myself out, really. I mean, now looking back, I definitely feel like, how did I not see that Ghislaine was, the puppeteer in it all?
Ghislaine Maxwell is a master manipulator. She knew how she was playing me. She knew how she was setting me up. She knew exactly that she was delivering me to the home of a predator.
Teresa and Shantae are not part of the criminal case against Ghislaine Maxwell, and they didn't file lawsuits against Maxwell. So Maxwell has never formally responded to their claims. But Maxwell has broadly denied any wrongdoing.
Every allegation should be taken seriously, but that doesn't mean every allegation should be believed without questioning, without scrutiny. Ghislaine has never admitted to any wrongdoing because she's not done anything wrong, and she's been fighting about this now in civil and criminal litigation, saying she's
Epstein's Victims' Compensation Fund and agreed to withdraw her lawsuit against Jeffrey Epstein's estate.
Ghislaine Maxwell was able to live with relative anonymity, but all of that is about to change.
Next tonight, disturbing allegation. A woman claims that Maxwell groomed her to be a sex slave to Epstein and was trafficked to some of his most powerful associates.
She has a photograph in Ghislaine Maxwell's apartment with Prince Andrew.
This is a terrific tale. Cruella de Vil, the daughter of Bob Maxwell. Let's add another president here. Let's add a prince there. It's a concoction, an invention.
Ghislaine holds the keys. She's the keeper of many secrets.
I'll ask you about all the allegations that have come out, Ghislaine.
Happy New Year.
Do you know Virginia?
Is it possible on any level that you just don't know your sister that well?
Ghislaine Maxwell's story is a fairy tale the wrong way round. The fairy tale princess starts life in a palace, and she ends up she is now.
lawyers of victims say that she was his main accomplice in an international sex trafficking scheme.
Is it true that you have had underage females for orgies with you and Ghislaine Maxwell?
They're still out there with no punishment.
Starting with Ghislaine Maxwell.
Virginia said that this carried on for years, that Jeffrey and Ghislaine made her their sex slave.
This is not my sister. Ghislaine is not Epstein.
That explosive scandal rocking the royal family.
Ghislaine tells me that I have to do for Andrew what I do for Jeffrey. That made me sick.
I don't remember that photograph ever being taken.
All of us were playing this game. Where in the world is Ghislaine Maxwell?
It looked like she was hiding. She was not hiding. That's a complete lie.
She's the keeper of many secrets.
People want answers, and we're not going to get them unless we ask Ghislaine Maxwell.
In the early 2000s, Ghislaine Maxwell was almost a full-time gal about town. Whenever there was an event, Ghislaine was being photographed.
You just see an explosion of picture after picture after picture. It's just a cavalcade of Ghislaine. She's everywhere with everybody.
People wanted to see her and be around her and so on, and it seemed to me that she was in her element and getting on, and I was pleased.
They're rich and powerful. She's friends with Prince Andrew.
She's inside the palace with Kevin Spacey sitting on thrones.
She's on a plane with President Clinton. She's side by side with Donald Trump.
Obviously, the photographs didn't tell everything. She had another life, a more private life that only came to light later.
Ghislaine Maxwell was Jeffrey Epstein's major domo. She was his confidant. She was his aide-de-camp. She traveled with him everywhere, but at the same time, lawyers of victims say that she was his main accomplice in an international sex trafficking scheme, that she was recruiting these underage girls and abusing them herself, but no one knew what was really going on.
The first time that somebody makes an accusation about Jeffrey Epstein that someone pays attention to is in Palm Beach in 2005.
The 14-year-old girl said that she'd gone to Epstein's home to give him a massage, and that sexual contact had occurred. The Palm Beach police began an investigation.
They bring in victims and they start interviewing them.
Did he offer you more money to do more things?
Yeah. $100 more just in jail.
They come up with the same pattern that they go to his house, they go to the kitchen, and then they're led upstairs to his bedroom, and then he comes in a towel. They rub his back or his feet for a little bit, and then eventually he turns over nude and then proceeds to lure and sexually assault them.
They were all telling us that they had either been recruited by an older female to them, meaning someone over 18, somebody in their 20s, or by someone who had already been a victim.
It was a whole network working together to solicit and bring these girls into his home.
Ghislaine Maxwell says that at the time of the police investigation in Palm Beach, she was very rarely in Florida.
Ghislaine said that her role in his life was greatly reduced compared to what it was.
Investigators certainly knew that Ghislaine Maxwell was associated with him. There were phone messages. She would call him, leave messages for him, but investigators never developed any information at that point that she was involved in this.
A South Florida billionaire has been arrested on prostitution charges.
53-year-old Jeffrey Epstein was arrested.
Epstein was charged by a grand jury with one count of solicitation of a prostitute. No mention of underage victims or minors.
Palm Beach police said they had found multiple alleged victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and they were not pleased with this single charge.
They immediately contacted the FBI and said, here, maybe you can do something with this.
But on June 30th, 2008, we learned that Epstein has somehow cut a deal.
The deal? That there would be no federal charges. Epstein would just quietly plead in state court to 1 count of solicitation of prostitution and 1 count of solicitation of a minor.
He served only 13 months in Palm Beach County Jail.
At this point, Epstein is a convicted sex offender, but Maxwell did not completely cut ties with him. She's acknowledged in a deposition that even after he went to jail, she occasionally did some work for him at his properties.
Why did you continue to maintain contact with Jeffrey Epstein after he pled guilty?
I'm a very loyal person, and Jeffrey was very good to me when my father passed away, and I felt that it was a very thoughtful, nice thing for me to do to help in a very limited fashion.
Many of the victims, very angry at the process, filed civil lawsuits against Jeffrey Epstein.
As the civil cases are winding through the courts, the victims' lawyers discovered Ghislaine was a bigger part of Jeffrey's life than anybody had thought before.
It was in the summer of 2009 when Virginia Roberts filed her lawsuit under the pseudonym Jane Doe 102.
Jane Doe 102 said that Ghislaine had recruited her when she had been working at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's resort, as a changing room assistant.
And Ghislaine makes this offer. You want to give a rich guy a massage in Palm Beach. And Virginia is then taken to Jeffrey Epstein.
Virginia said that Jeffrey and Ghislaine made her their sex slave. The lawsuit was the first time that Ghislaine was mentioned as one of Jeffrey Epstein's main accomplices.
Ghislaine became more of a focus for us, the civil attorneys who were prosecuting the civil cases. Is it true that you have had underage females for orgies with you and Ghislaine Maxwell?
I would like to answer that question.
At the crack of dawn Wednesday, a black sedan sped away from the Palm Beach County Jail. Its passenger, Palm Beach billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. After a year in jail, Epstein is a free man. His attorney says he is ready to move on.
While Jeffrey's the target of this massive investigation, Ghislaine emerged from this relatively unscathed. She continued living her life as she had.
Ghislaine Maxwell had not been publicly linked to any of the allegations against Jeffrey Epstein, but then came that lawsuit from Jane Doe 102, also known as Virginia Roberts Giuffre.
She was alleging that Ghislaine was an active participant in the sexual abuse of minors.
In this lawsuit, Virginia is not suing Ghislaine Maxwell, she's suing Jeffrey Epstein. But now when Epstein is deposed and other people are deposed in the lawsuit, suddenly the plaintiff's lawyers have a reason to dig. They have a reason to ask about Ghislaine Maxwell.
Can you tell us your full name for the record?
Jeffrey Edward Epstein.
During the depositions, he invoked his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent every time.
Another longtime friend of yours is Ghislaine Maxwell, right?
And Ghislaine Maxwell and you have devised several schemes to lure underage girls to you for sex. Isn't that correct? Is it true that you have had underage females for orgies with you and Ghislaine Maxwell? Is it true, Mr. Epstein, that you and Ghislaine Maxwell forced Virginia Roberts to have sex with you on a daily basis?
Unfortunately, at this time, no matter how I'd like to respond to your questions, I must assert my Sixth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution.
I also am deposing Epstein's staff and former staff, trying to find answers.
One of the few witnesses who actually answers the lawyer's questions is Alfredo Rodriguez.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
One of Jeffrey Epstein's former butlers, Alfredo Rodriguez, worked for Jeffrey before he had been arrested by Palm Beach police. Even though Ghislaine says that she was not involved in Jeffrey's life in Palm Beach around the time of the investigation, based on Alfredo's testimony, there's a different story here. He described Ghislaine as the lady of the house.
What he says, essentially, is that she was still very much running the house.
Alfredo was asked, did Ghislaine know that underage girls were coming to Jeffrey Epstein's house? And Alfredo answered, Ghislaine knew what was going on.
Do you know whether Miss Maxwell kept the names and telephone numbers of the girls who came to do massages?
Yes, ma'am.
It eventually turns up that Alfredo Rodriguez has kept a copy of what, has now infamously been labeled the Black Book.
It was just a stack of computerized sheets with addresses and names that Epstein kept in all of his homes.
Alfredo Rodriguez tried to sell a copy of the supposed Black Book to one of the plaintiff's lawyers for $50,000. And he got arrested. He went to jail.
The Little Black Book contains the names not only of masseuses in different cities, but the names and phone numbers of very prominent, rich, and powerful people.
Presidents, heads of state, heads of industry.
They appeared to be a lot of friends of Ghislaine's, from Oxford and England and America.
I wanted to talk to Ghislaine. We actually had process servers up in New York trying to find her. The day before I was to take Ghislaine's deposition, she, through her lawyer, canceled with the explanation that she was leaving to go see her mother over in Europe and never to return to the country. A short period later, I see in a magazine that she's front and center at Chelsea Clinton's wedding, clearly in the country. I was told repeatedly, she's never coming back.
By the time of Chelsea Clinton's wedding, Jeffrey Epstein had settled his lawsuit with Jane Doe 102 or Virginia Roberts Giuffre.
So it made a little bit of a headline that suddenly Ghislaine Maxwell is accused of participating, but then it just, it goes away. So it seemed at the time that was the end of it.
But Virginia's story will be impossible to ignore.
It doesn't die, it comes back.
She has a photograph of herself in Ghislaine Maxwell's apartment, where it is her, Ghislaine, and Prince Andrew in the photograph that's being taken by Jeffrey Epstein, and she's only 17 years old.
Ask you about all the allegations that have come out, Ghislaine. Do you know Virginia? Can you at least say if she's been in your house?
My passion for the ocean started when I was a little girl. I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau on TV and became mesmerized with the oceans. It led to me becoming a deep water submersible pilot.
In 2012, Ghislaine forms a nonprofit company called Terramar.
She started Terramar really to educate people, in particular children, about how the oceans needed to be protected. Doing a pretty good job, I think.
So how does it all look? Is my hair good?
Ghislaine appears in a video series called One on One, shown on HuffPost, in which she talks about the preservation of the oceans.
The ocean is absolutely vital to all planetary life systems. I call it the blue heart of the planet.
So she wasn't only a socialite who was well connected, she was now an environmental advocate who cared about the oceans.
And then in 2015, she hits the news cycle for an altogether different reason.
Now to the growing royal scandal on the cover of every paper.
The Virginia Roberts Giuffre allegations are now back and front and center.
In new court filings in a lawsuit against the U.S. government for making the deal with Epstein, Giuffre goes into greater detail on her allegations about Maxwell's role in Epstein's alleged sex trafficking.
Virginia
claims Ghislaine Maxwell was basically her madam.
She makes, for the very first time in court, very specific allegations that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell directed her to have sex with Prince Andrew on 3 occasions.
Years later, Virginia would tell the BBC about what she says happened.
Ghislaine tells me that I have to do for Andrew what I do for Jeffrey. And that made me sick. The next day, Ghislaine tells me I did a really good job. She pats me on the back and said, "You made him really happy."
Buckingham Palace issued a statement on Prince Andrew's behalf saying it is emphatically denied the prince had any form of sexual contact or relationship with Giuffre.
People really started to put the microscope on Ghislaine.
Ask you about all the allegations that have come out, Ghislaine. Happy New Year. Obviously, they're very damning, involving British royalty. You've got no comment at all?
I made a statement, thank you.
Ghislaine Maxwell, through an agent, releases us lies.
Do you know Virginia? Can you at least say if she's been in your house? Okay, you're obviously not going to speak, so have a good day.
Wishing you a happy New Year, thank you.
You too, thank you.
She actually started consulting with Jeffrey Epstein. She writes him an email, and Jeffrey replies, "You have done nothing wrong, and I would urge you to start acting like it. Go outside, head high, not as an escaping convict. Go to parties, deal with it."
A judge decided that Giuffre's allegations about Maxwell didn't belong in the case against the U.S. government. So what happened next? Virginia Roberts Giuffre takes the fight directly to Ghislaine Maxwell with a defamation lawsuit for calling her claims obvious lies.
All bets were off. You're now being litigated against, and once you're subpoenaed, you gotta show up. A deposition is like testimony. You are under oath. Anything you say can then be used against you in future proceedings.
There were 2 depositions. Both were sealed until a court ordered them to be released last year. We don't have audio or video, but we do have the transcripts.
Did Jeffrey Epstein have a scheme to recruit underage girls for sexual massages?
I don't know what you're talking about. When I was there, at the time I was present, the people that gave Jeffrey, men and women who gave Jeffrey massages, were adults over the age of 18.
Ghislaine Maxwell presents a fairly black and white version of events. This never happened. Well, I didn't see anything.
I never saw any inappropriate underage activities with Jeffrey ever.
Maxwell accused Giuffre of inventing details to, quote, make the story more exciting.
You know she lied about absolutely everything. She is a liar, an exaggerator, a fantasist, and an absolutely true terrible person.
Maxwell claims she would barely remember Virginia at all if not for the allegations. Although according to flight records, someone with the initials GM had been on Epstein's planes with Virginia more than 20 times.
When Virginia's lawyers ask, "Well, you were on a plane with Virginia," Ghislaine says, "Oh, a G and an M listed in the flight records? That could be somebody else."
Is it your testimony that on the flight logs, when it represents GM, that it is not you flying on the plane?
It could be Georgina, George.
This was a very contentious deposition.
At one point in the deposition, when the client jumps in and starts lawyering on her own behalf.
Let's move on.
I'm in charge of the deposition. Say when we move on and when we don't.
Just one day before this defamation trial is set to begin, Maxwell and Giuffre settle the case with no admission of wrongdoing.
Ghislaine Maxwell has not been criminally charged in connection with Giuffre's allegations.
Now with her legal matter with Giuffre settled, Maxwell appears to be making changes in her life.
Ghislaine Maxwell has begun to withdraw from her life in New York City.
She wasn't on page 6 anymore. She wasn't at the Met Gala. And she sells her New York City Upper East Side apartment for $15 million.
Ghislaine is this social chameleon. She continues to reinvent herself.
She is basically starting a completely new life, and she has a secret. There's a spouse that nobody knew about.
All of us were like, what? Ghislaine is married? Who is her husband?
In the year 2016, Ghislaine Maxwell apparently leaves New York for the quiet, idyllic life on the coast of Massachusetts in Manchester by the Sea.
Which would be kind of the last place you would think she would be.
Nobody knew it then, but we now know she was married in 2016.
Ghislaine Maxwell is a wife. She's a stepmom. What was it like to find out that she was married and she'd never told you?
Well, I mean, it was surprising, I think I would say.
Why do you think it was, though, that she did keep her marriage a secret, even from her family?
Ghislaine took the view that she's entitled to a private life and she's going to have it, and it is going to be private, and including from her own family. That's okay. I'm all right with that. I don't see that's so wrong. The last time I saw her was June 10, 2019, here in London. It was the last time that all of my siblings were together, and it was a very happy occasion for all of us.
And then all of a sudden,
Multi-millionaire Jeffrey Epstein was arrested Saturday in a New Jersey airport.
In an undercover operation.
He's accused of trafficking girls in Florida.
Be arrested.
Just couldn't believe that Jeffrey Epstein was really in custody, because in my mind, he had through the years almost convinced me that he really was untouchable.
The prosecutors charged him in a conspiracy, which means he didn't do this by himself.
Authorities were going to start investigating anybody who worked for Epstein and who might have abused these girls.
I do feel relief. But having said that, there's still a very powerful feeling of, okay, what's going to happen next? Like, how is he going to get out of this, basically?
Thanks for joining us. We are coming on the air with breaking news.
Sources tell ABC News Jeffrey Epstein took his own life.
there are mounting calls for an investigation.
Who's to blame for the system's failure? For many people, after Jeffrey Epstein died, the focus shifted to Maxwell. For some victims, the focus was always primarily on Maxwell.
This is breaking news.
A chance for dozens of Jeffrey Epstein accusers to have their voices heard in court before the sex trafficking case against the late financier comes to an end.
It's very unusual to have victims give impact statements after the defendant is dead, but these alleged victims had been wronged for a lot of years.
I had to really make the decision if I was going to get up and speak in the courthouse. Maybe halfway through the hearing, a few people started mentioning Ghislaine Maxwell's name and how she was part of this operation and was somebody that needed to face justice.
It makes me sick to my stomach that there's perpetrators out there that obviously helped him in many ways for a very long time, and they're still out there with no punishment.
We need to get to the bottom of everybody who was involved with that, starting with Ghislaine Maxwell.
I just hope there's justice, and I hope there's accountability, and I hope there's significant consequence for the behavior of Ghislaine Maxwell.
So Epstein is dead. The crimes he was then indicted with in 2019, he never faced. But Ghislaine is not Epstein.
With his death, the focus began to bear down more on Ghislaine. And where was she?
The real problem is that the media frenzy about her. You pick up the newspaper, the Daily Mail, doesn't matter what it is. It's the same old rubbish. So that's all that the public has ever heard. They've never heard the defense to all of this.
I mean, people want answers. People want answers, and we're not going to get them now that Jeffrey Epstein is dead, unless we ask Ghislaine Maxwell.
going to make life easy for them. It's the family story that fascinated me, and as a storyteller, I thought I want to tell this story. That's why I did the podcast. She's got 3 passports, British, French, and American, a fortune of roughly $20 million, a kaleidoscope with bank accounts.
All of us were playing this game. Where in the world is Ghislaine Maxwell?
The theories ran rampant. She was hiding in a submarine. She was walking the streets of Paris with a blanket over her head. Some people said she was in a high-security doomsday bunker. So it was just like one unbelievable scenario after another.
The Sun newspaper put a £10,000 reward on her head for information leading to a sighting of her. I mean, can you imagine that? It's incredible.
All kinds of questions arose because of all the attention placed on Ghislaine. So if you're going to place attention on Ghislaine's alleged role, then Prince Andrew's name figures in a very prominent way.
Prince Andrew decides he's going to go on the BBC Newsnight and defend his reputation and his honor and give an interview.
This was a highly anticipated interview, and in it he talks about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
He says he was unaware of Epstein's activities with underage girls. He denied that he had any sexual contact with Virginia Giuffre and said he had no memory of ever meeting her.
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
And he suggested that the photograph may have been faked.
Nobody can prove whether or not that photograph has been doctored, but I don't recollect that photograph ever being taken.
The interview turned out to be a total disaster, forcing the prince to resign from his official duties.
1 year after Jeffrey Epstein's arrest, almost a year after his death, and there's dozens of victims out there, and no one else has been arrested. Who could be next?
Ultimately, the FBI had been discreetly keeping track of her the entire time.
And where the FBI found her, no one could have guessed.
It turns out that Ghislaine Maxwell had recently moved into this very small town in central New Hampshire called Bradford. It's really out of the way. So much so that the estate that she was living in was actually called Tucked Away.
Continuing to live a life of privilege while her victims live with the trauma inflicted upon them years ago.
On the morning of July 2nd, FBI agents knock on the door. Ghislaine doesn't open it. Authorities have to bust open the door to arrest her.
She immediately went into a sort of interior room, and that she had a cell phone with tinfoil wrapped around it, presumably so it couldn't be tracked.
We begin with the FBI's arrest of Jeffrey Epstein's longtime associate, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Aux États-Unis, depuis, on l'appelle Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Maxwell.
Maxwell 著名的社交名流马克斯韦尔。
She's arrested with hoopla, with helicopters and the FBI running about. It's pure prejudice.
It looked like she was hiding. That was what it looked like.
She was not hiding. That's a complete lie. Her lawyers knew exactly where she was at all times.
Today we announced charges against Ghislaine Maxwell for helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually exploit and abuse multiple minor girls from the period of 1994 through 1997.
Ghislaine Maxwell was the first step in a grooming process, and that's what the indictment reflects.
Maxwell played a critical role in helping Epstein to identify, befriend, and groom minor victims for abuse. In some cases, Maxwell participated in the abuse herself.
The U.S. attorney said she delivered them into the trap. She pretended to be a woman they could trust, and all the while she was setting them up.
Maxwell's presence as an adult woman helped put the victims at ease.
There are 3 unnamed victims in the indictment.
Annie Farmer is the only alleged victim to identify herself publicly. She spoke to the court via video conference and later shared what she said with us.
I met Ghislaine Maxwell when I was 16 years old. She has never shown any remorse for her heinous crimes or for the devastating, lasting impact her actions have caused.
Maxwell has also been hit with perjury charges related to those civil depositions she gave back in 2016.
Maxwell compounded her crimes by repeatedly lying when she was questioned under oath. Maxwell lied because the truth, as alleged, was almost unspeakable.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all the charges against her.
We're talking some pretty serious accusations. As a brother,
I was shocked, tremendously shocked. You're correct, these are very serious charges. But at the same time, I also thought, this is not my sister. She could not possibly have been involved in this kind of activity.
She wouldn't have even been charged had she not been associated with Epstein. Epstein died. They need someone. Let's be honest about what's going on here. If there was real evidence, she would have been charged long ago.
Ghislaine Maxwell is scheduled to go before a judge today to find out if she will be granted release on bond.
More than a dozen friends and relatives wrote letters to the court as part of her bail application in support of Ghislaine Maxwell. They wrote that she is, quote, kind and caring, and, quote, she would not be capable of such behavior.
Maxwell also got a show of support from none other than the President of the United States.
I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, but I wish her well.
Why keep her in custody? She's proposed the highest bail package that I've ever seen, $28.5 million. She's offered to renounce her foreign citizenship.
But it wasn't enough for the judge. Bail was denied in this case.
This former socialite is being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where inmates have complained about inhumane conditions.
The feds have egg on their face because Jeffrey Epstein was able to kill himself in jail, and now they're watching Ghislaine Maxwell's every move.
I've visited Ghislaine Maxwell at the jail, and anybody who would see the conditions she's under would be shocked. She's stuck in a small 6x9 room. She's basically kept in solitary confinement unless you count the rats and the cockroaches as roommates.
She's constantly under surveillance. She has a flashlight shone in her cell every 15 minutes during the night, so she has no sleep of any real quality. And that is torture.
I think people watching will say, that was incredible what happened to Jeffrey Epstein. They've got to make sure the same thing does not happen again.
Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted offender. My sister has never been charged in any jurisdiction in the world, ever. Just take 5 seconds and think about it and say, God, what would happen if it was my sister?
The Bureau of Prisons has defended itself and said she's being treated the way a defendant of her stature should be treated.
Cut a deal with prosecutors.
The government is absolutely trying to break her to make sure that she can't prepare for trial.
The question is going to be, do we learn more about any alleged actions of some very high-profile people?
I guarantee you right now, there are a lot of powerful people, men, who are quaking in their boots.
Ghislaine holds the keys. She's the keeper of many secrets.
Tonight, Ghislaine Maxwell is facing new federal charges of child sex trafficking.
In March of 2021, the prosecutors filed what is called a superseding indictment, meaning an additional indictment, with an additional victim.
Prosecutors accusing her of trafficking a 14-year-old girl in the early 2000s, a fourth underage alleged victim in the case.
And this fourth alleged victim goes back to the early 2000s and to Epstein's Palm Beach mansion.
The
government claims that Maxwell was present when the girl was nude in Epstein's massage room, and that Maxwell encouraged the girl to recruit other young females to provide sexualized massages to Epstein.
She appeared in a courtroom for the first time since her arrest last July, and her defense attorney entered a not guilty plea on her behalf. Well, she appeared to be much different than we've ever seen her before. More frail, older looking, sunken eyes, graying hair.
Ghislaine is in very, very, very difficult conditions. I've never seen anything like it, how she's being treated.
I don't believe that there is any credible evidence, any basis whatsoever, to assert that Ms. Maxwell is the victim.
You cannot predict the outcome of Ghislaine Maxwell's upcoming trial.
This is going to be, as a legal matter, a challenge for prosecutors. Any case like this, where you're going to be relying on witness testimony of events that occurred 20 or 30 years ago, is not going to be an easy case.
I think prosecutors are confident in the strength of their case and the testimony of the 4 alleged victims. They also tell us, though, their investigation continues. So if there are other women who believe they've been victimized by Ghislaine Maxwell, they're encouraged to come forward to the FBI.
I'm just asking people, wait, examined.
There is an enormous amount of intrigue around this case. And the question is going to be, do we learn more about any alleged actions of some very high-profile people?
People talk about secrets that Ghislaine might have on all kinds of famous people. What do you feel when you hear rumors like that?
I think it's ludicrous. It's part of this whole fake jamboree of news and speculation.
All this chatter out there about what else she knows, who else she could implicate.
Judge ordering the release of what could be thousands of pages of documents.
New details are emerging about how she remained in the shadows for so long.
Do you see why there might be little public sympathy for her?
Well, the press have decided that, she's guilty. Hell no, she's not. She's presumed innocent. Someone has to stand up for Ghislaine and say, wait a minute, these are allegations. Nothing has been proven.
Many of the victims hold Ghislaine more responsible than Jeffrey for enabling his conduct.
Ghislaine Maxwell is not a replacement for Jeffrey Epstein. Not even the slightest bit. Her crimes and her, wrongdoing, she has made herself complicit. She is a criminal. She's a predator.
Is there some tiny part of you, is it possible on any level, that you just don't know your sister that well? That there's a side of her that you just never knew?
I think that's true of absolutely everyone in the world. We never know each other, really. I think we've got a very good feeling, and I really don't have that doubt. I do believe that she is innocent of these charges, completely.
It's fascinating to see who is the real Ghislaine. Are the accusations against her true?
Ultimately, the fate of Ghislaine Maxwell will lay in the hands of a jury, and that's as it should be.
And that will happen this coming fall. Her trial is scheduled for November and is expected to go several weeks into the new year.
Meanwhile, as you know, Amy, she has now made 5 unsuccessful attempts. Watching, I'm David Muir.
And I'm Amy Robach. From all of us here at ABC News and 2020, have a good night.
From ABC News, 9/11, the day that changed America. Here now, David Muir.
Good evening. On the eve of one of the darkest days in American history. Tomorrow marks 20 years since 9/11. Tonight here, Americans who lost loved ones, the survivors who got out, the first responders who answered the call, their bravery, their heroism, and tonight, their wish. So many telling us they hope this country will pause to remember the pain of that day and the humanity that followed. One survivor telling me she has carried the that she survived when others did not, only to realize she's here for a reason, to tell the story to the next generation. Tonight, what they lived through and their hope that Americans will again come together.
The morning of 9/11, it was warm, it was clear skies, it was a beautiful fall. It was a clear, beautiful morning.
Yeah, it was. I would walk past the fire department until I could say hi to the firemen that I would see all the time.
You were making breakfast for the girls in the kitchen.
I was. We had gotten up early. It was Anna Claire's first day of preschool.
I'm Diane Sawyer, and it's Tuesday, September 11th, 2001.
I turned on the television to watch the news.
We've got 60 degrees at Dulles Airport, 66 at Reagan National.
This was your second day on the job?
My second day on the job, yes. Reporting to the Pentagon for work. Started out like a regular day.
Come on, Stretch. Come on.
The president was in Florida.
And that morning on 9/11, he was up early to go running. The president had traveled there to do an education event.
How far to go altogether? 4.5.
A perfect day in America. It was a glorious day. And the world changed.
A ticket agent in Portland, Maine.
I was working the first class counter. There was a couple of guys that were in a big hurry. One shorter guy, his name was Muhammad Atta. He seemed to be in an awful bad mood. So I just said, well, if you don't get up there quickly, you're going to miss your flight altogether. And he gave me a sneer.
They would fly from Portland, Maine to Boston's Logan Airport. They would then board American Airlines Flight 11. And 15 minutes after takeoff, the hijackers were forcing their way into the cockpit.
Nobody move. Everything is okay. If you try to make any move, you'll danger yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet.
I had just asked American 11, is that you? American 11, do you hear me? I was the first person to realize that a hijacking was taking place within our country.
A total of 19 hijackers soon in the air on 4 airplanes. And Flight 11 would soon be headed to the Twin Towers.
My name is Stanley Premnet. I worked at the World Trade Center on the 81st floor.
The 77th floor.
I was on the 90th floor. This feeling in you like I'm on top of the world.
There was over 100 stories tall. About 50,000, maybe more, people worked at the World Trade Center.
We were told that this building was so massive that it was built to withstand 5 helicopters crashing simultaneously into it without taking it down.
We lost radar on him, but that was about 5 minutes ago. He was 8 miles east of JFK.
American 11 was flying evidently down the Hudson River. It was going at very high speed.
We saw a plane right behind the Empire State Building heading right towards us.
Battalion Chief Joe Pfeiffer out on another call, about to hear that plane overhead. 8:46 a.m.
The plane hit almost directly above me, 3 floors up on 93, ripping through the building, followed by the exploding gasoline.
This is at the World Trade Center, and there has been some sort of explosion. We don't fully know the details. There is one report that a plane has hit the World Trade Center.
There's no way it was a small plane.
I could see in the building that was way too big for that.
There is that thick black smoke now emanating from the building. Debris falling to the street below.
Florence Jones was in the South Tower when the North Tower was hit.
I just sat down at my desk on the 77th floor, and when you heard that loud bang, the whole building, and I said, go to the TV and tell me what they're saying hit the building. So at that point she said, get out of the building.
What did you see?
I was just looking at all the papers and people hanging out of the windows and trying to figure out where was the plane. Where did the plane go? And she says, it's in the building. Then it really hit me why these people were hanging out of the building. And I was like, oh God.
We have fire on several floors, visible flames from inside the building. So every ambulance you got, 12 Bravos responded to the World Trade Center.
As we're going across Canal Street, I'm thinking to myself, geez, I wonder how many people need our help right now.
The plane severely damaged all 3 stairwells of the North Tower. There would be no escape for the people trapped on the top 19 floors, and New York City firefighters were now racing into that building.
Last thing I told them was, they're trying to kill us, boys. Let's go.
17 minutes after Flight 11 hits the North Tower, workers in the South Tower see something.
All I could see was this dark shadow. I was like, what the heck is that? It was huge.
The plane is coming towards me like this. And as the plane got to the closest 1,500 to 1,000 yards away, the plane starts to tilt.
9:03 a.m.
Oh my God! The next building is just blew up! Oh my God! I don't believe it!
That looks like a second plane. It was obviously designed to attack the World Trade Center.
And that big orange glow that you see there, I'm in the middle of that big orange flame.
Everything rained down on us.
Every desk is mangled. The only desk that stood firm is the one I'm under. My Bible is on top of that desk.
Florence Jones had just been on the 78th floor telling colleagues they needed to get out. She had just come back down to 77. The plane hit 1 floor above her.
Yeah. And I realized if I had stayed up there, I would have been dead. What caught my attention was the fact that people that I knew were 100 plus stories up were hanging outside of the window. And I watched them. They were making a sign of the cross.
We saw what we thought was debris, and we realized it was people jumping. I can't do any more.
They knew they were going to die, but they didn't want to die in that building. There just was no way other than to jump.
You have talked about the respect you thought was owed to them in that moment.
Many people have said I couldn't watch that, and I said, you really kind of owed it to them to watch that, because they made the ultimate sacrifice.
And that bearing witness to what they were doing.
Yep.
That it was someone acknowledging the pain that they were going through.
Yes. I give them a lot of credit for doing what they did.
The president in Florida is about to learn the second tower has been hit.
Yes, mate, give yourselves a pat on the back.
Yeah.
I leaned down and I whispered into his right ear, a second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack.
And then the real shock, the look on the president's face.
I had never seen that look of gravity and concern.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
And that airline ticket agent already asking himself, was there anything I could have done?
Somebody said to me, didn't you check in a couple of guys on that flight? I says, yes, I did. And I just... I lost it. And I'm thinking, you start, what did I miss?
The hijackings occurred right when the fasten seatbelt sign goes off. They bought certain seats in first class. They would go into the cockpit, kill the pilot and the co-pilot, and then seal off the rest of the plane. And then they would turn off the transponder, which would make the plane essentially disappear into radar clutter.
Okay, let me tell you this. We're looking, we're also lost American 77, and they don't have any idea where he is or what happened.
The third aircraft that was missing was American 7.
The White House has been advised.
I looked up, and that is when I see the airplane that will crash into the Pentagon. It's crossing the freeway, it's knocking the light poles down, so I would say it was no more than 25 feet off the ground. It went right through the first floor windows of the Pentagon. It just disintegrated.
We now have a report that fire has been confirmed at the Pentagon.
This is Gopher 06. It looks like that aircraft crashed into the Pentagon, sir.
When you hear that the Pentagon's been struck on 9/11, there are 25,000 people that work there.
That whistling sound from an airplane engine, the fireball that passed right to the right of me as I'm still sitting in my cubicle.
It was Sheila Moody's second day on the job.
I could hear people for a few seconds, and then there was just a strange, eerie quiet. I got up and shook the embers off my hands. My back was burning. I was like, Jesus, I don't believe you brought me here for me to die like this.
Chris Brayman, working in the Pentagon too.
It was so dark you barely could see, and it was just so incredibly hot.
I hear a fire extinguisher, and then I hear a voice of somebody yelling, is there anybody in here?
Each of us would take turns, yelling, come to our voice. We could hear the screams.
And I said, we're here. He says, I can't see you. I said, I can't see you either. I says, but we're here. We're in here. So I started clapping my hands, and I was clapping my hands together as hard as I could.
So he could hear you?
So that they could hear us. I turned and I looked, and I could see some movement through the smoke. As I reached through the smoke, there was a hand on the other side.
And that voice, that hand that reached out to you in that smoke.
That was my rescuer that day.
20 years later, back together in this room. Do you remember that day reaching into that cloud of smoke for her hands?
I just remember looking over, and then grabbing her and then running her as fast as we could to where the medics were.
Sheila's hands covered in burns, and she has never forgotten what she heard on the radio.
You could hear the communications that were going on coming across the radio, and then you hear there's another plane coming.
There's an aircraft coming.
There are possibly 1 or 2 more planes that have been hijacked.
The entire area has been evacuated, and this is a disaster.
We would see just hundreds of people going down the streets, trying to get away from D.C.
The president was raced to the motorcade, and it began a 9-hour odyssey. The president didn't know where he could go to be safe.
Fairly early on, the name Bin Laden started.
Finger at Osama bin Laden.
The CIA very early that morning had identified the names of the hijackers because they had been tracking Al-Qaeda. And they had photographs of people getting on the airplanes.
Right there on the manifest, they saw names they recognized, known operatives who had long worked for Al-Qaeda and for Osama bin Laden.
The president says, where are we going? And I said, to Barksdale Air Force Base. He says, no, we're going back to Washington, D.C. I said, Mr. President, you don't want to make that decision right now.
Air Force One had been in the air and out of sight for almost 2 hours. And at some point, we felt the aircraft go even higher, much higher than it had been before.
The president was on the phone with Dick Cheney. Cheney said to him, just got a report.
says Angel is next. Angel was the code word for Air Force One. That sent a shiver down everybody's spine. Who's got the code word for Air Force One? There was chaos in New York at the moment. Both trade towers now, these 110-story high towers, have now been hit.
Visible flames from the side of the building. Confirmed, we have fire on the upper floors of the World Trade Center.
Chief Joe Pfeiffer, the first to arrive, now coordinating the rescue effort inside the lobby of the North Tower.
The pilots of the police helicopters realized they couldn't land on the roof because of the smoke. So what that left us to do was to climb the narrow stairs and to evacuate everybody from the building.
He would send firefighters up, including his own brother, Lieutenant Kevin Pfeiffer, and Brian Clark on the 84th floor, now coming down.
We got to the 81st floor landing. I heard this muffled cry inside the 81st floor. Help, help, I'm buried. Is anyone there? I can't breathe.
I'm trying to get up. I'm pushing the debris, and I made a fist as tightly as I could, and my fist passed through that wall, and the man grabbed my fist, and he pulled with such force.
He landed on top of me.
And this good man put his hand around my shoulder and he says, "Come on, buddy, let's go." We had 80 floors to go.
Now you know you have to get out.
Yes, we started running. We got into the stairwell. There was so much smoke, we all had to kind of like hold hands, hold on to somebody's shirt in front of us so that we could see where we were going. And I was like, we need to keep going. We have to keep going.
They see the firefighters going up.
And they asked us where we came from, and we said 77. And they were like, Jesus, like, I don't know what to tell you. I wouldn't go up there.
On the 83rd floor outside the door.
I saw the flashlight of the firemen.
The glass door was a godsend because it allowed them to see us.
As soon as I saw the flashlight, I ran to the door. I really think we only would have survived another 5 or 10 minutes.
In both towers now, workers in the stairwells trying to get out. Florence and the offer from her boss.
I had the shoes on, and I was really starting to shake, and I just couldn't control it. And he said, "Florence, take your shoes off, because otherwise you're gonna fall." So I gave him my shoes, I gave him my handbag, and the other gentleman, he stayed next to me and held my hand all the way down.
Of the last 25 people out of that tower, you were number 18.
I knew we were amongst the last people to come out of it. I just feel very fortunate to have made it out.
Air traffic controllers still trying to track down every plane.
I ordered all aircraft in the air to land at the nearest airport.
Command Center has implemented a nationwide ground stop for all arrivals and departures.
And praying that there wasn't going to be another one. Of course, there was another one, United 93.
They hear sounds of a struggle from Flight 93.
Negative contact, we're looking at United 93.
As the morning continued,
Both towers have been hit by planes now in the last half hour.
I began to think about where Tom may be.
On board Flight 93, the hijackers with a message for the passengers.
They got the piston down. Keep remaining steady. We have a ball aboard.
You were actually on the phone with his mother when he clicks in, and he says to you,
I'm on United Airlines Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco, and the airplane has been hijacked. The hijackers were trying to get into the cockpit, and they had already knifed a guy. And he told me to call the authorities, and he hung up.
At what point do you tell him what you're watching play out on that kitchen TV?
While I was talking to the FBI, Tom called a second time. And at that point, I told him that there were other hijackers, there were other planes. He wanted to know who the hijackers were, what did they want.
United 93 just reported that they heard screaming on the frequency and the people have a bomb on board.
And the moment you tell him that you've now watched 2 planes go into the World Trade Center,
he immediately knew that it
Lolis was 3 months pregnant.
It was, Jack, pick up, sweetie. Okay, there's a little problem on the plane.
Flight attendant Sandy Bradshaw calling her husband Phil.
She was telling me how her flight had just been hijacked by 3 guys with knives, and that they were boiling water to throw on them.
He said that he was putting a plan together to take back the airplane, that there was a group of them. He told me they were waiting until they were over a rural area. I just remember being an old flight attendant. That training kind of kicked in, and I just said, you need to sit down, be still, be quiet, and not draw attention to yourself.
And when you told him, as a previous flight attendant yourself, to stay in your seat and not draw attention to yourself, did you suspect even in saying that wasn't going to work?
I knew as the words were coming out of my mouth that it was the wrong thing to say, because he yelled back into the phone. He said, no. If they're going to drive this plane into a building, we're going to do something.
They had a plan.
Had a plan.
If American jet fighters were to encounter another hijacked airliner, would they shoot down a civilian-loaded airliner?
That was a conversation that took place, so the decision was made, and the president gave the authorization to shoot down civilian aircraft.
Lives in the air to save lives on the ground. That is a stunning development.
We had learned that the White House was being evacuated. We learned that the entire airspace had been shut down. We also learned that Flight 93 was still airborne.
United 93, United 903, do you hear Cleveland?
Tom called a third time, and it was really in that phone call that I realized that there was nothing I could do or say. He was going to go after the hijackers.
They were defending their country.
I think they were defending everything that's good about humanity.
In those final moments, loved ones on Flight 93 calling home.
She finished her message with, I love you, please tell my family I love them too.
She told me to raise the kids right, and I told her that I wanted to do it with her and that she needed to come home. And then we got to talking, about how much we loved each other. And she said, Phil, everyone's running to first class.
A message for her husband, Lorne.
Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, Dave. I don't know what to say. There's 3 guys. They've hijacked the plane. I'm trying to be calm. We're turned around, and I've heard that there's planes that's been flown into the World Trade Center. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
When you heard the cockpit recorder,
Tom's voice yelling in the cockpit, as if he was leading the charge.
With those fellow passengers storming the cockpit.
It's like a movie. It just never changes. Wondering, what were his last thoughts? What was the last thing he saw? Did he see the ground? Did he feel anything? You just remember little things. The sound of the engine coming through the phone. The feeling of wanting to help him and knowing that I couldn't.
10:03 a.m. United Flight 93 crashes outside Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Do you see any activity on your right side, smoke or anything like that?
We do have a smoke puff now at about, probably 2 o'clock. It appears to be just a dark cloud, like a puff of black smoke.
The engines had gone down through the woods.
Shanksville Volunteer Fire Chief Terry Schaefer.
There were so many small pieces broken up with the size of your fist or less. It was just unbelievable.
The policeman who was assigned to my home came to me and said, I think that was your husband's plane. And I just remember my knees buckling. I just fell.
20 years later, you remember that?
remember it so well. The emotion of it. I said everything I needed to say.
Which was?
I love you.
We had a crash near Pittsburgh here today.
I remember the vice president calling the Pentagon and saying, "Did you shoot down an airliner?" And they kept saying, "We can't confirm." And he kept saying, "You must know if you shot down a civilian airliner." But of course, it was the plane that had gone into that field in Pennsylvania because those very brave passengers were determined not to let it attack again.
It was only 56 minutes between the impact of the South Tower and the collapse.
Stanley and I, we got on the west side of Trinity Church, and all you could see was the South Tower.
And as we stood there, we seen this building in smoke, and the building is swaying. And I'm like, it's going.
I said, "There's no way, that's a steel structure." And I didn't even finish that sentence.
A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
I was standing in the North Tower. At 9:59, I heard a loud rumbling sound. And I had about 1 second, maybe 2 at the tops, to make a decision what to do. It moved and pushed some people in front of me to a little alcove off the lobby. Then the lobby goes completely black, where I can't see the hand in front of my face.
It's gone! The whole tower! It's gone! Holy crap!
There were gasps and screams that I could hear from the street.
The second building that was hit by the plane has just completely collapsed. The entire building has just collapsed. It folded down on itself, and it is not there anymore. The whole building has collapsed.
The whole building has collapsed?
The building has collapsed.
We're talking about massive casualties here at the moment, and we have... Whew.
The South Tower has collapsed. 29 minutes later, 10:28 a.m.
The North Tower.
Still inside the North Tower, Captain J. Davis can feel the building sway.
And I got a couple feet away from the stairway door, and it starts. They collapsed at the North Tower with
Fire Chief Rich Picciotto of the 6th floor.
And then all of a sudden there's no stairs, and I'm just free falling in blackness. So my thoughts were, please God, make it quick, because it's going to be over in a split second. And all of a sudden, black nothing. And I thought I was dead.
The collapse suffocating the city for blocks.
Everybody get out! We had a collapse in the second tower! Urgent, urgent!
Let's get in here! Get away from the glass! My shit! Get behind! Oh my God! Oh my God! Look at the shadows there! Oh my God! You're right! Oh my God, you saved my life! I'm just tired.
Thousands of tons of debris on top of us. This is a crypt. We're never getting out.
There were beepings everywhere. Later I found out that first responders carry locators, and they're going off everywhere. Somewhere in that debris, Captain Jay Jonas and his team, when suddenly they see a piece of the sky.
And all of a sudden, a ray of sunshine hit the stairway. And I looked up and I could see like a little sliver of blue sky. I said to the guys, guys, there used to be 106 floors over our heads. Now I see sunshine. So I think we're on top of the World Trade Center.
16 people would survive on a small part of the stairwell, still standing.
I just shake my head. I says, I can't believe I'm here.
We lost a lot of people. We lost 343 firemen that day.
23 New York City police officers were killed, and 37 Port Authority police officers were killed.
What brought these two skyscrapers to crash to the ground? It was the fuel that started fires on multiple floors and started to weaken the steel columns. It pulled the outside of the building in and caused the progressive collapse.
Both trade towers have now been attacked and destroyed. So if you're a parent, you got a kid in some other part of the country, call them up.
Inside the cabin of Air Force One, there's a television, and the president is watching, and we watched the towers collapse. Just helplessness, because all we can do is at that picture of the collapsed towers.
The president returns to Washington.
He's leaning over on the left side of the plane. You can see the fighter jets, and out of the right side of the plane, you can see the plume of smoke still rising from the Pentagon.
And he said to nobody out loud, the mightiest building in the world is on fire. That's the face of war in the 21st century. Terrorists against a superpower.
Today our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
I just remember it began what I called the hard heaviness. We were a nation at war, and we were preparing a counterattack.
Do you see your husband and your girls every day?
I do see Tom in each of the girls. Hallie has his drive and determination. Anna Claire has his wit. Madison has his practicality. They are their father's legacy. And they are my joy.
And this is my great niece, Adriana John. She's named after her grandfather.
And a new grandbaby 21 days ago.
Yes, another blessing.
You think about all the milestones missed, like the people who shared that office.
You think about every graduation and weddings, babies, and the impact of one life being taken leaves a hole in the lives of so many people.
I ask myself many, many times, Lord, why me? Of all these good men and women, why me?
Lawrence asks that question too. We have followed her for nearly 20 years. We will never forget seeing those reflecting pools for the first time.
Wow.
The names of the fallen etched in bronze, and Florence's friend, Jill Moore Campbell.
I always remember Jill's smile. I try never to think about the way she died. As a company.
And now, 20 years later, a phone call from Jill's son.
Oh, I was so happy to talk to him. The first things out of his mouth was, "Can you tell me something about my mom?" And I said, "You know what? Your mother's biggest smile that I remember was the day she brought you into the office." And I said, "Your mom was a very, she's a good person. She worked really hard. But her biggest pride and joy was being your mom. And I said she'd be very proud of you.
It's hard to imagine a child who never knew his mom calling you up nearly 20 years later and saying, can you please tell me something about my mom?
This young mother didn't get to do the job she wanted to do the most. And I thought it was ironic because I don't have children. I was like, if I could change places with your mom, I would have.
Hey, Jake. Hi. And this is Jake, Jill's son. He was just a baby on 9/11. He's now 20, and he says Florence has given him a gift.
It was incredible for me to hear. Just her smile. I don't know if it's because Florence was the last person to see her and the bond that they had. Just hearing that from her and just getting this kind of confirmation that the ability to make people smile is something that I've missed, but it's good to know that that's who she was, and I have a little bit of her in me.
Do you ask yourself, why me? Why did I survive?
You're not prepared for the weight that is put on you after this. You have to get past that and realize that you're here for a reason, only if it's to tell the story, to tell it to the next generations of what happened. So I have learned to handle the burden. It's not easy.
And Dina Bailey, who says there were so many heroes that day.
It's not just Tom's story. It is the story of every person on that flight coming together and serving the same purpose. And I think that that is the strength that we draw from that story of Flight 93.
20 years later.
20 years later, 50 years later.
As a country marks 20 years, what is your hope?
I'd hope that people realize if you weren't around when 9/11 happened, you need to understand about blue or red. It was about humanity, and we all cared. I just feel we are tearing each other apart, and we need to stop. We need to realize this could happen again. It really could. And then what are we going to do?
You have to stand up and say, let's do this. We can do this. We're going to do this. You can't wait for someone else to take that lead. Take it yourself.
Remember their sacrifice.
Remember. Remember.